The smell of pine and cinnamon hung thick in the air of the diner, mixing with the grease from the fryer and the bitter tang of overbrewed coffee. Christmas lights blinked erratically along the windows, casting red and green shadows across empty booths. My feet ached, a deep, bone-weary throb that radiated up my calves and settled in my lower back. 8 hours. 8 hours of forced smiles, of pretending the holiday cheer plastered on every surface didn't make the loneliness cut deeper. I wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, my reflection staring back at me from the chrome napkin dispenser. Dark circles under my eyes. Hair pulled into a messy bun that had given up hours ago. The cheap polyester uniform clung to my skin, damp with sweat and the residue of 1,000 orders I'd carried tonight. "You heading out soon, sweetie?" Marlene called from the kitchen, her voice scratchy from decades of cigarettes. "Yeah, just finishing up." My voice sounded hollow, even to my own ears. Christmas Eve. Everyone else had somewhere to be. Families gathered around tables laden with food. Couples exchanging gifts by glowing trees. And me? I'd volunteered for the closing shift, because an empty apartment felt worse than serving strangers who barely looked at me. The bell above the door chimed. I glanced up, ready to recite the "we're closing" speech I'd perfected. But the words died in my throat. She wasn't what I expected. Mid-50s, maybe, with kind eyes and an expensive coat that looked out of place in our rundown diner. Her heels clicked against the checkered linoleum as she approached the counter, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, something floral and sophisticated that didn't belong in a place that smelled like yesterday's meatloaf. "We're about to close, ma'am, but I can get you something to go. I'm not here to eat." She smiled, and something about it made my chest tighten. Pity. I recognized it immediately. "I'm Maria. I come here sometimes for the pie. You served me last week, remember?" I didn't, but I nodded anyway. Faces blurred together after a while. "You mentioned you'd be working tonight, Christmas Eve." She set her purse on the counter, fingers drumming against the worn formica. "Do you have plans after your shift?" The question landed like a stone in my stomach. No, not really. "My nephew," she continued, her voice gentle, careful. "He's alone tonight too. His family, well, it's complicated, but he's a good man. And I hate thinking of him spending Christmas in that big house by himself." I should have said no, should have recognized the warning signs, the careful way she watched me, the practiced ease of her pitch. But exhaustion makes you stupid. Loneliness makes you desperate. A blind date? The words tasted strange in my mouth. Just dinner, company, 2 people who shouldn't be alone on Christmas. She pulled out her phone, showed me a picture. "His name is Dante. He owns some businesses in the city. He's harmless, I promise." The photo showed a man in his early 30s, dark hair, strong jaw, eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it. Handsome in a way that made my stomach flip. Too handsome. Men who looked like that didn't need blind dates arranged by their aunts. "I don't know. Please." Maria's hand covered mine, warm and soft. "Just a few hours. You'd be doing me a favor. I worry about him." The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Through the window, I could see snow beginning to fall, fat flakes that would probably turn to slush by morning. My apartment waited. Cold, dark, silent, except for the neighbor's TV bleeding through the thin walls. "Okay," I heard myself say. "Just dinner." Maria's smile brightened. She pulled out a card, pressed it into my palm, an address in the North End, embossed in gold. 9 o'clock. "Wear something nice. And, honey," she squeezed my hand. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." I stood outside my apartment building 2 hours later, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The dress I'd found in the back of my closet, a simple black number I'd bought for a job interview that never pandereered out, felt inadequate. Everything felt inadequate. My coat had a missing button, my heels were scuffed. I'd done what I could with makeup, but I still looked like exactly what I was, a waitress playing dress-up. The car that pulled up made my heart stutter. Black. Sleek. The kind of vehicle that cost more than I'd make in 5 years. It glided to the curb like a predator, silent and precise. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. A man emerged from the driver's side. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my rent. He didn't smile as he approached, didn't speak. Just opened the rear door and stood waiting, his eyes scanning the street with mechanical efficiency. "Miss Hayes?" His voice carried an accent I couldn't place. "Mr. Dante is expecting you." This was wrong. Everything about this screamed wrong. But I found myself moving toward the car, my feet carrying me forward even as my brain shouted warnings. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Expensive cologne, maybe, or just the scent of money. The door closed behind me with a heavy thunk that sounded too much like a cell door locking. The drive took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. We left my neighborhood, the check-cashing places, the convenience stores with barred windows, the graffitied walls, and entered a different world. Brownstones with wreaths on the doors. Streets lined with cars that gleamed under the streetlights. People walking dogs, carrying shopping bags, living lives I'd only seen in movies. The driver didn't speak, didn't even glance at me in the rearview mirror. Just drove with the focused intensity of someone who'd done this route 1,000 times. We pulled up to a building that made my throat dry. Not a restaurant. A home. 5 stories of brick and stone. Windows glowing with warm light, a door that looked like it belonged in a castle. 2 men stood outside, hands clasped in front of them, earpieces visible even from the car. Security. "This isn't a restaurant," I said, my voice cracking. The driver finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Dante prefers privacy. He's waiting inside." Every instinct screamed at me to run. To throw open the door and sprint back to my tiny apartment, my empty refrigerator, my lonely Christmas. But then, the building's door opened, and Maria appeared, waving, her smile bright and encouraging. "Come on, sweetie. You're just in time." My legs felt like lead as I stepped out of the car. The cold bit through my thin coat, but I barely felt it. The men at the door watched me approach, their eyes tracking my every movement. One of them spoke into his wrist, too quiet for me to hear. Maria took my arm, guiding me inside. "He's a little nervous," she whispered, as if sharing a secret. "It's been a long time since he's done anything like this." The interior was worse than the exterior. No, not worse. Better, terrifyingly better. Marble floors. A chandelier that probably cost more than my car, if I'd had a car. Art on the walls that looked real, original, the kind you saw in museums, a curved staircase that led to floors I couldn't see, and the smell. Not pine and cinnamon like the diner. Cedar and smoke, expensive leather. And underneath it all, something darker. Danger wrapped in luxury. "He's in the dining room," Maria said. But she'd already released my arm, already stepped back, her job done. I walked down the hall alone, my heels clicking against marble. Each step echoed, announcing my presence, my intrusion into a world I didn't belong in. Through open doorways, I glimpsed rooms furnished like movie sets, a library with floor-to-ceiling books, a sitting room with furniture that looked antique, valuable. The dining room took my breath away. A table long enough to seat 20, but set for 2. Candles everywhere, their flames dancing in the draft from my entrance. A tree in the corner, decorated with ornaments that caught the light and threw it back in 1,000 directions. And standing by the window, his back to me, a figure that made everything else in the room disappear. He was taller than I'd expected from the photo. Broader. The suit he wore fit like it had been made for him. Because of course it had, emphasizing shoulders that looked capable of carrying weight I couldn't imagine. Dark hair, slightly too long, curling at the collar, hands clasped behind his back, one thumb rubbing against his palm in a gesture that seemed almost nervous. "Miss Hayes." His voice rolled through the room like distant thunder, deep and measured. He didn't turn around. "Thank you for coming." I should have said something. Should have responded with the polite pleasantries you exchange when meeting someone new. But my throat had closed, my tongue thick and useless in my mouth. He turned. The photo hadn't done him justice. Couldn't have captured the way his presence filled the space, making the enormous room feel suddenly intimate. Dark eyes that fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. A face that was handsome, yes, but hard. All sharp angles and shadows, the kind of face that had seen things, done things, a thin scar cut through his left eyebrow. Barely visible, but there if you looked. And he was looking at me. Really looking. In a way that made me feel stripped bare. Every inadequacy exposed. You're cold. It wasn't a question. He moved toward me, and I noticed how controlled his movements were. Deliberate. As if he had to consciously moderate his strength. "Let me take your coat." His fingers brushed my shoulders as he slid the coat off, and I swear I felt electricity shoot down my spine. He handed it to someone I hadn't noticed. Another man in a suit, materializing from the shadows and disappearing just as quickly. "Please, sit," he gestured to the table, pulling out a chair himself. The gentleman's gesture felt strange coming from someone who radiated such raw power. I sat because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. He took the seat across from me, and I realized the placement was strategic. Close enough to see every expression, every flinch, but far enough that I couldn't easily flee. "Maria tells me you work at Tony's diner." He reached for a bottle of wine I hadn't noticed, pouring deep red liquid into crystal glasses. "How long have you been there?" 2 years. My voice sounded foreign. "It's just temporary, until I figure out what's next." A slight smile touched his lips, but it didn't reach his eyes. Most temporary things become permanent. We tell ourselves we're just passing through, but one day we look up and realize we've built a life in the interim. There was something in his tone, experience maybe, or regret. I wrapped my hands around the wine glass, needing something to anchor me. The crystal was so fine I feared it would shatter at my touch. "You didn't want to be here tonight," he said. And it wasn't a question. Maria can be persuasive. "Neither did you, I'm guessing." The words came out before I could stop them, emboldened by nerves and the absurdity of the situation. His eyebrow, the one with the scar, lifted slightly. "No," he agreed. I didn't. But I'm glad she insisted. Footsteps approached, and suddenly the room filled with people. Not guests, staff. They moved with synchronized precision, placing plates in front of us, filling water glasses, adjusting napkins. Food appeared like magic, courses I couldn't name, presentations so elaborate they looked too beautiful to eat. And through it all, Dante watched me. Not the food, not the carefully choreographed service. Me. "This is too much," I whispered when the staff retreated, leaving us alone again. "I'm just a waitress. I don't—" "You're not just anything." His voice had an edge now, sharp enough to cut. "Don't diminish yourself." The command in his tone made me flinch. This wasn't polite dinner conversation. This was something else entirely. I picked up my fork, more to have something to do with my hands than from actual hunger. The food tasted like air, or maybe I was too nervous to register flavor. Every sound seemed amplified. The clink of silverware, the rustle of his movements, my own too loud breathing. "Tell me about yourself," he said, cutting into his food with mechanical precision. Beyond the diner, beyond tonight, what was there to tell? My life was small, forgettable. But his eyes demanded an answer, so I gave him fragments. College dropout, dead-end jobs, an apartment I could barely afford. Dreams that had withered from neglect. He listened like every word mattered. His focus so complete it felt physical, a weight pressing against my skin. "And family?" he asked. "Why spend Christmas alone?" The question hit harder than intended. "There's no one," I said simply. "My mom died when I was 20. I don't know where he is, Dad. It's just me." Something flickered across his face. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "I know what that's like. Being alone." "You have Maria," I pointed out. "I have Maria," he agreed. "And a dozen other people who depend on me, work for me, need things from me. But being surrounded by people isn't the same as not being alone." The vulnerability in those words surprised me. For a moment, the hard mask slipped, and I glimpsed something underneath. Something tired. Something human. The moment shattered when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his entire demeanor changed. The softness vanished, replaced by something cold and dangerous. He stood abruptly, the chair scraping against marble. "Excuse me." The words were clipped, controlled. He was already moving toward the door, the phone pressed to his ear, his voice dropping to a low growl I couldn't decipher. I sat alone in the enormous room, surrounded by luxury I couldn't comprehend, and realized I'd made a terrible mistake. This wasn't just dinner. This wasn't a lonely man seeking company on Christmas. This was something else entirely. Through the doorway, I heard voices. Dante's, sharp and commanding, and others responding with deference that bordered on fear. Words filtered through. Problem, shipment, handle it. My hands started shaking. I set down my fork before I dropped it, the metallic clatter too loud in the silence. He returned 5 minutes later, his expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands flexed at his sides. "I apologize," he said, retaking his seat. "That was unavoidable." "What do you do?" The question came out before I could stop it. "Maria said you own businesses, but..." "But?" He picked up his wine glass, studying me over the rim. "But this doesn't feel like a businessman's house." The truth tumbled out, reckless and dangerous. "This feels like a fortress." His smile was razor sharp. "Perhaps I have enemies. What kind of businessman has enemies like this?" I gestured vaguely at the room, at the security I'd noticed, at the phone call that had transformed him into someone terrifying. He set down his glass with deliberate care. "The kind who deals in things people want but aren't supposed to have. The kind who solves problems others can't. The kind your mother warned you about." He leaned forward, and I could smell his cologne now, cedar and something darker, intoxicating and terrifying. "The kind you should run from, Miss Hayes." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Are you warning me or threatening me? I'm being honest." His eyes held mine, and I couldn't look away. "You walked into something tonight you don't understand. My aunt thought she was doing us both a favor, but she put you in a position neither of us asked for. Then let me leave." I pushed back from the table, my legs unsteady. He moved faster than I expected, circling the table in 3 long strides, not touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "I should," he said quietly, dangerously. "I should have my driver take you home right now. But I don't want to." "What do you want?" The question trembled between us. His hand lifted, hovering near my face, not quite touching, "Something I have no right to." The air between us crackled with tension. I should have been terrified, should have run screaming from this house. This man, this dangerous Christmas Eve that had spiraled into something I couldn't control. But I didn't move. His phone buzzed again, shattering the moment. This time, anger flashed across his face, raw, barely contained. He looked at the screen, and whatever he saw there made his expression darken. "I need to handle something," he said, his voice tight. "It can't wait. But don't leave. Please." The last word sounded like it cost him something to say. He was gone before I could respond. His footsteps echoing down the hall, followed by other footsteps, other voices. The house suddenly felt alive with activity I couldn't see, movement in the shadows, doors opening and closing. I stood alone in the dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and guttering candles, and realized I'd somehow stumbled into a world that operated by rules I didn't understand. A world where a simple Christmas dinner was never simple. A world where the handsome man with the sad eyes and dangerous smile wasn't what his aunt pretended he was. And the most terrifying part, even knowing that, even sensing the danger that clung to him like smoke, I couldn't make myself leave. I should have called a cab, should have walked out the front door and never looked back. Instead, I found myself wandering through the first floor of Dante's house like a ghost, drawn by curiosity and something deeper I didn't want to name. The library called to me, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes that looked actually read, not just decorative. I ran my fingers along the spines, feeling the embossed titles under my fingertips. Dante in Italian, Machiavelli, Sun Tzu's Art of War, books about strategy, power, survival. He reads them all. Maria's voice made me jump. She stood in the doorway, her kind eyes now carrying something else. Assessment, maybe, or concern. Every night before bed, says it helps him think. Maria, what does he really do? I turned to face her, needing answers. Please don't lie to me. She moved into the room, her heels silent on the Persian rug. For a long moment, she studied me, weighing something internal. He protects people, she finally said, in his own way. The family business. It's complicated. Old world, new world, traditions that don't fit in normal conversation. The Mafia. The word tasted foreign in my mouth, like something from movies, not real life. She didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either, just looked at me with those sad, knowing eyes. He's not what you think. Yes, he's dangerous. Yes, he's done things that would horrify you. But he's also the only person who showed up when my daughter was dying, who paid every hospital bill, who held my hand at her funeral when everyone else had somewhere more important to be. Her voice cracked. He's the boy I helped raise after his parents were killed, the man who remembers every birthday, every anniversary. The nephew who shouldn't be alone on Christmas because he's already alone every other day of his life. Footsteps approached, heavy, multiple sets. Dante appeared with 2 men flanking him, their faces grim. He stopped when he saw me, something flickering across his expression. I thought you'd left, he said quietly. I should have, but you didn't. He dismissed the men with a subtle gesture, and they disappeared instantly, well-trained shadows. Maria excused herself too, leaving us alone in the library filled with books about war and strategy. Dante moved to the window, staring out at the snow that had begun to fall harder. There was an incident tonight. One of my warehouses. Nothing you need to worry about. A warehouse for what? I moved closer, drawn despite every self-preservation instinct screaming at me to maintain distance. He turned, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. Raw. Unguarded. Things that would make you see me differently. Things I can't take back or apologize for because they're who I am. He took a step toward me. I'm trying to decide if I want you to know the truth or if I'd rather you kept the illusion for just a little longer. I already know. My voice was steadier than I felt. You're involved in something illegal, something dangerous. That's why you have armed guards and bulletproof cars and a house that looks like a fortress. And you're still here. It wasn't a question, but wonder colored his tone. Why? I didn't have an answer. Or maybe I did, and it was too pathetic to speak aloud. That loneliness made you stupid, that the way he looked at me made me feel seen for the first time in years. That danger wrapped in expensive suits was still preferable to another empty Christmas alone. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it without looking. They can wait. Can they? I challenged. You run an empire, Dante. I'm just a waitress who said yes to a blind date. We both know how this ends. He moved fast, closing the distance between us until I could count the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. How does it end, Maya? My name and his voice sounded like a prayer and a curse. Tell me. Because I'm trying to figure out why meeting you feels like the first real thing that's happened to me in a decade. His hand lifted to my face, and this time he made contact, fingers tracing my jawline with devastating gentleness. The touch sent electricity racing down my spine, pooling low in my belly. I should have pulled away, should have remembered who he was, what he was. Instead, I leaned into his palm, and his eyes darkened. This is a mistake, he murmured. But his thumb was brushing across my lower lip now, and I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Probably, I whispered. He kissed me. Not gently. There was nothing gentle about Dante. It was possession and desperation, his hand tangling in my hair, the other gripping my waist like he was afraid I'd disappear. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt, feeling the hard muscles beneath expensive fabric. When he pulled back, we were both breathing hard. His forehead rested against mine, and I felt him trembling. This powerful, dangerous man trembling from one kiss. Stay tonight, he said, his voice rough. Just stay. I don't want to be alone. I don't want you to be alone. Every rational thought screamed no. Every survival instinct I possessed demanded I run. But something in his voice, that raw vulnerability he was trying so hard to hide, made me nod. Okay. He gave me a room on the 3rd floor. a guest suite that was bigger than my entire apartment. The bed looked like something from a palace, piled with pillows and covered in silk sheets. A fireplace crackled in the corner, filling the space with warm, dancing light. "There are clothes in the closet," Dante said from the doorway, maintaining careful distance now, as if that kiss had scared him as much as it had me. "They should fit. And if you need anything, there's a phone by the bed. Just dial 0. "Who answers?" I asked. "Security?" A ghost of a smile. "Something like that. Try to sleep, Maya. Tomorrow we'll figure out what happens next." He started to leave, but I caught his arm. "Dante? Thank you. For tonight. For not lying to me." His expression softened, and he pressed a kiss to my forehead. Chaste, tender. Nothing like the one in the library. "Lock the door after me, and don't open it for anyone but me." The implied threat in those words should have terrified me. Instead, I felt oddly safe. I locked the door as instructed and explored the closet. Designer clothes with tags still attached hung in neat rows, women's clothes in various sizes, as if he'd prepared for any possibility. I chose soft pajamas, cashmere that felt like a cloud against my skin. Sleep should have been impossible, but exhaustion dragged me under almost immediately. I dreamed of dark eyes and dangerous smiles, of hands that could hurt but chose gentleness, of a kiss that tasted like Christmas and sin. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The blind date, the fortress house, Dante's kiss in the library. Someone had left a tray outside my door. Coffee, pastries, fresh fruit arranged artfully on fine china. A note in bold, masculine handwriting. "Good morning. Join me for breakfast when you're ready. Third door on the left, second floor." D. I showered in a bathroom that had more marble than most museums, dried off with towels that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and found clothes laid out on the bed that fit perfectly. Jeans that actually fit my curves, a soft sweater in deep green, even undergarments in my size. The attention to detail was either thoughtful or deeply unsettling. Maybe both. Following Dante's directions, I found him in a sun-drenched breakfast room that overlooked a garden buried in snow. He stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and commanding. I don't care what excuse he gives. He had one job and he failed. Make an example. He paused, listening. "No, I'll handle Romano myself. Set up a meeting for tonight." Another pause, and his voice dropped to something deadly. "If he resists, remind him what happened to the last person who thought they could steal from me." He turned and saw me frozen in the doorway. Something shifted in his expression, the cold calculation melting into something warmer, more human. "I have to go," he said into the phone, then ended the call without waiting for a response. "Maya, I wasn't sure you'd still be here." "I wasn't sure either," I admitted, moving into the room. The table was set for 2, laden with food that looked professionally prepared. "Do you always eat breakfast like this?" "Usually I don't eat breakfast at all," Maria insisted, once she learned you'd stayed. He pulled out a chair for me, that old-world courtesy at odds with the violent conversation I'd just overheard. "I hope you slept well. Better than I should have, considering." I sat, acutely aware of how close he was, how his cologne, that cedar and smoke scent, made my head spin. "Who's Romano?" His jaw tightened. "Someone who made a poor decision. It doesn't concern you. You're going to hurt him. Not a question. I'm going to teach him why stealing from me is a fatal mistake." He sat across from me, pouring coffee with steady hands that had probably broken bones, pulled triggers, done things I couldn't imagine. "Does that frighten you?" It should have. God, it should have. But looking at him in the morning light, seeing the shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept, the way his fingers drummed against the table in barely contained tension, I felt something else entirely. "Yes," I said honestly, "but not enough to leave." Satisfaction flashed across his face, quickly masked. "Eat. We have things to discuss." The food was incredible, but I barely tasted it. Dante watched me between bites of his own meal, his gaze intense, cataloging every movement. "I need to tell you something," he said finally, setting down his fork with deliberate care. "And you're not going to like it." My stomach clenched. "What?" "Last night, after you fell asleep, I had my people run a background check on you." He held up a hand before I could protest. Standard procedure. Anyone who enters my home, my life, gets vetted. I don't apologize for it. Anger flared, hot and immediate. You had no right. I had every right. His voice cut through my protest, sharp as a blade. You're in my world now, Maya, whether either of us planned it. That means I need to know everything about you. For your protection as much as mine. My protection? I laughed, bitter and sharp. From what? From my enemies. From people who would hurt you just to get to me. He leaned forward, and the intensity in his eyes pinned me in place. The moment you walked through my door, the moment we kissed, you became a target. Anyone who learns you matter to me will try to use you as leverage. The words should have sent me running. Instead, I heard something else buried beneath them. I matter to you? We just met. I know. He looked almost angry about it, frustrated by something he couldn't control. I know it's insane, but from the moment I turned around and saw you standing in my dining room, looking terrified and brave and so fucking beautiful it hurt. He stopped, jaw working. Something changed. Something I didn't plan for and don't know how to handle. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dante, your background check came back clean. Almost too clean. You're exactly what you appear to be. A woman working too hard for too little, alone in a city that doesn't care if you disappear. His voice gentled, but there was one thing that stood out, your father. Ice flooded my veins. What about him? Robert Hayes. Disappeared 8 years ago after being questioned about embezzlement from his employer, a construction company that did work for various organizations. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Organizations connected to my family. The room tilted. What are you saying? I'm saying your father stole from people I'm associated with. $500,000 that was supposed to go to certain projects. He vanished before anyone could recover the money. Dante's eyes bore into mine. I'm saying there's a file on him, a debt unpaid. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was telling me. My father, useless, absent, the man who'd abandoned my dying mother and disappeared into the wind, was connected to the Mafia. You think I know where he is? My voice sounded hollow, distant. You think that's why I'm here? No. He stood, moving around the table toward me. I don't think that at all, but others might. When word gets out that you're under my protection, people will ask questions. They'll dig into your past. They'll find that connection. Under your protection? I stood too, needing to move, to escape the suffocating weight of his revelations. I'm not under anything. I'm leaving. This was a mistake. His hand caught my wrist, gentle but immovable. You can't leave. Watch me. Maya, listen to me. He pulled me closer, and I hated how good it felt, how safe despite everything screaming that he was the danger. My people aren't the only ones who ran that background check. By now, every family in the city knows you spent the night here. They know I kept you when I should have sent you home. They're already making assumptions, drawing conclusions. What kind of conclusions? But I already knew. Could see it in the grim set of his jaw. That you're mine. That you matter. That hurting you would hurt me. His other hand came up to cup my face. Thumb brushing away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. I can't undo that. I can't send you back to your apartment and pretend nothing happened. You'd be dead within a week. The words landed like physical blows. This is insane. You're insane. We had one dinner, and one kiss that rewrote every rule I have about keeping people at distance. His forehead pressed against mine, and I felt him shaking again, that barely contained emotion that seemed so at odds with his reputation. I'm sorry. I'm so fucking sorry. But I can't let you go now. I won't. You're keeping me prisoner. The accusation hung between us, ugly and true. I'm keeping you alive. He pulled back, and the look in his eyes was raw, desperate. Stay. Give me time to handle this, to make you safe again. And if I refuse? Something dark flickered across his face. Then I'll have to make that choice for you. The threat was clear, unmistakable. But underneath it, I heard something else. Fear. He was afraid. afraid of what would happen to me, afraid of what he was becoming, afraid of feelings he couldn't control. I should have fought, should have screamed, demanded my freedom, called the police. Though what good would that do against a man who probably had half the force on his payroll? Instead, I asked the only question that mattered. Why? Why do you care what happens to me? His laugh was bitter, self-mocking. Because for the first time in 10 years, I felt something other than emptiness when I looked at another person. Because you didn't flinch when I told you what I was. Because you're standing here arguing with me instead of cowering, and it's the most real conversation I've had since... He stopped, jaw clenched. I don't know why, Maya. I just know that the thought of someone hurting you makes me want to burn the entire city to ash. The intensity in his voice should have terrified me. Maybe part of me was terrified. But another part, the lonely, desperate part that had said yes to a blind date just to avoid spending Christmas alone, felt something else entirely, wanted, protected, seen, even if it came wrapped in danger and threats and a gilded cage. How long? I asked quietly. How long do I have to stay? Relief flooded his features, so profound it almost hurt to witness. Until I make you safe. Until everyone in this city knows that touching you means war. His hand slid down to lace his fingers through mine, and the gesture felt more intimate than any kiss. I have enemies, Maya, powerful ones who would love nothing more than to find my weakness and exploit it. But I also have resources. Influence, people who owe me favors, give me time to use them. I looked around the breakfast room, at the luxury I'd never known, at the man holding my hand like I was something precious and breakable. What if I said I wanted to leave anyway? That I'd take my chances? His grip tightened fractionally. I'd stop you. Lock you in this house if I had to. Assign guards to watch your every move. His voice dropped to something almost pleading. But I'm hoping you won't make me. I'm hoping you'll choose to stay. To trust me. Trust. What a joke. Trust a man who ran a criminal empire, who'd just admitted to running background checks and making threats. Trust someone who kissed me like salvation and trapped me like prey. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw something that made the choice easier. He was as trapped as I was, caught in a situation neither of us had planned, feeling things that terrified us both, unable to walk away even though we should. I'll stay, I said finally, and watched relief and something darker, possession maybe, flash across his face. But I want answers. I want to know everything. What you do, who you are, what I'm really caught in. Agreed. He brought my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles that felt like sealing a deal. A dangerous deal. A deal that might destroy me. But God help me. I couldn't bring myself to care. The next few days blurred together in a strange mixture of luxury and captivity. Dante kept his word about answers, though each revelation made me wish I'd stayed ignorant. He controlled territory across 3 states, gambling, protection, imports that never went through official channels. He had judges on payroll, cops who looked the other way, politicians who owed him favors they could never repay. When he spoke on the phone, grown men trembled. When he walked into a room, everyone else fell silent, and he was obsessed with keeping me safe. I couldn't leave the house without an escort of at least 3 armed men. My phone, he'd given me a new one, untraceable, had limited contacts. Maria visited daily, bringing clothes that actually fit, telling me stories about Dante as a boy that didn't match the dangerous man I was coming to know. He was gentle once, she said on the 3rd day, hemming a dress in the sitting room while I pretended to read, before his parents died, before he had to become this. What happened to them? I'd been afraid to ask Dante directly, sensing the wound was still raw despite the years. Maria's hands stilled on the fabric. Betrayal. Someone they trusted. Dante was 19, supposed to be at university, building a different life. Instead, he came home to find them executed in their own bedroom. Her voice dropped. He hunted down every person involved. Took him 2 years, but he found them all. Made examples that people still whisper about. The image didn't match the man who read to me from his library at night, who made sure I ate even when I wasn't hungry, who looked at me like I was something precious he was terrified of breaking. But it was the same man. That was the terrifying part. On the 4th night, everything changed. Dante had been gone all day, handling what he vaguely termed business complications. I'd learned not to ask for details about his absences. The tight set of his jaw when he returned told me enough. But tonight, when he finally came home near midnight, something was different. He was covered in blood, not his own. I realized with dawning horror. His movements were too fluid, too controlled. But his white shirt was splattered with crimson, his knuckles split and raw, and there was a wildness in his eyes I hadn't seen before. "Don't look at me." His voice was rough, destroyed. He stood in the doorway of the library where I'd been waiting, frozen by the sight of him. "Not like this." "Please, Maya, don't." But I was already moving toward him, instinct overriding self-preservation. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm not the one who's hurt." He backed away from my approach, but I followed, relentless. "Romano." He thought he could run, thought he could steal from me and disappear. His laugh was hollow, bitter. "They always think they can run." My hands reached for his shirt, and he caught my wrists, holding me at bay. "I killed him, Maya. Slowly. Made sure he understood the price of betrayal before I put a bullet in his head." His eyes searched mine, desperate, waiting for the horror and rejection he clearly expected. "This is what I am. This is what I do. So please, for the love of God, go upstairs and lock your door and stop looking at me like I'm something worth saving." I should have run. Should have been disgusted, terrified, revolted by the violence literally staining his clothes. Instead, I saw past the blood to the exhaustion beneath it, the weight he carried, the loneliness that mirrored my own. "Let me help you clean up," I said quietly. His grip on my wrists tightened. "You should hate me." "I know." I met his wild gaze steadily, but I don't. Something broke in him. He released my wrists and pulled me against his chest, heedless of the blood, his face buried in my hair. I felt him shaking, felt the careful control he always maintained crumbling. "I don't deserve you," he whispered against my temple. "Don't deserve this, but I'm too selfish to let you go." I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the hard muscles beneath ruined fabric, the heat of him, the desperate way he held me like I was the only thing keeping him human. "Then don't." He pulled back just enough to look at me, and the raw need in his eyes made my breath catch. "Maya." I kissed him, rose on my toes and pressed my lips to his, tasting copper and desperation and something darker. He responded instantly, his blood-stained hands tangling in my hair, his mouth claiming mine with bruising intensity. It wasn't gentle, wasn't soft or romantic. It was desperation and possession. Two lonely people finding something in each other they didn't know they needed. His hands mapped my body like he was memorizing every curve, every line, committing me to memory in case I disappeared. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. "I need to shower, to get this off me. I'll wait." "No." His thumb traced my lower lip, and his voice dropped to something rough and wanting. "Come with me." Every rational thought fled. I let him lead me upstairs to his private suite, a room I hadn't been allowed to enter before. It was masculine, spare, dominated by a massive bed that looked barely used, and windows that overlooked the snow-covered garden. The bathroom was all dark marble and chrome. He turned on the shower, steam beginning to fill the space, then turned to me with an expression that was part question, part challenge. I answered by reaching for the hem of my sweater. His hands covered mine, stopping me. "Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine in every way that matters. In every way my enemies will understand." His eyes burned into mine. "Are you sure?" "No." I wasn't sure about anything except that being away from him hurt more than being near him, that his darkness called to something in me I didn't want to examine too closely, that loneliness had teeth and his touch made them release their grip. "I'm sure." He undressed me slowly, reverently, like unwrapping something sacred. Each piece of clothing removed revealed more of me, made me more vulnerable. But the way he looked at me, like I was art, like I was everything, made the vulnerability feel less like weakness and more like power. When I was bare before him, he shed his own ruined clothes, and I finally saw the full extent of what he was. Scars mapped his body, bullet wounds, knife marks, Burns that spoke of violence survived. Each one told a story of survival, of battles won at terrible cost. "You're beautiful," I whispered and meant it. His laugh was self-deprecating. "I'm a monster." "You're both." I reached up to trace the scar that cut through his eyebrow, and I'm starting to think I need both. He pulled me into the shower, hot water cascading over us, washing away the blood and horror of his night. His hands were gentle now, washing my hair, tracing patterns on my skin that made me shiver despite the heat. I did the same for him, watching crimson water circle the drain, cleaning away evidence of violence until only the man remained. When we were clean, he pressed me against the marble wall, his body a line of heat against mine. "Tell me to stop." "No." His mouth claimed mine again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. His hands mapped every inch of me, learning what made me gasp, what made me moan. I responded in kind, exploring the hard planes of his body, feeling powerful muscles tense under my touch. "Maya," he groaned against my throat, his control fracturing. Yes." I didn't need him to finish the sentence. I needed it too. Needed this connection, this proof that we were both still human, despite everything trying to make us otherwise. He lifted me effortlessly, my legs wrapping around his waist, and suddenly there was no space between us, no barriers, no pretense. Just raw need and desperate connection, and the feeling of finally being completely seen by another person. It wasn't gentle. Couldn't be, with all the emotion churning between us. But it was real. More real than anything I'd felt in years. His hands gripped my hips hard enough to bruise, claiming me, marking me as his. I returned the favor, nails raking down his back.